As you'll remember from the last episode, one of my loyal viewers, Bud from Pennsylvania, sent me some tools because he was tired of seeing me fumble around with the wrong ones. I've been using them on this project and I really appreciate it. Well, apparently when I used my internal torque wrench to tighten up the bolts, it didn't sit well with another one of my viewers. I didn't know that there was a problem because this is the way I've always done it. I just tighten it until it's about tight enough. And I guess when he saw me with the prop, that was the last straw. Rob, a retired Air Force tech sergeant and F-16 mechanic from Homestead Air Force Base, said, "The correct torque of bolts is very important, and therefore you should be using a torque wrench." Thank you very much, Rob. To say that I was surprised was an understatement, but he sent me a 3-piece torque wrench set with 1/4, 3/8, and half-inch drive. I've always wanted one, but I guess I never was able to get one, and now I can go around checking the torque on everything. The manual lists all of the specifications for torquing all the different bolts and nuts that are associated with this engine, but I didn't have anything to actually do it very accurately. So now, when I put everything together, I'm going to make sure that everything is torqued per the manufacturer's specifications. My wife said that when I finally get to 1,000 subscribers, I should get her a tennis bracelet. I put the lower unit in a big container of water, but it didn't really seem to cover the inlet holes too well because I didn't have the motor flusher at the time. And then I tried to start it, and it would start and then stop. And it seemed to be a fuel issue. There's a quick connect fitting that goes from the fuel tank to the outboard, I guess in case you wanted to switch tanks if you carried a spare tank. But it seemed to be leaking, and the connector was dripping gas out of it. So I was just going to eliminate it altogether because I'm not going to be switching tanks. My thought was to just use a barbed fitting to join the two pieces of fuel hose together. And then also I wanted to look at the fuel pump, which is right here. It appeared to be the original one, and I'm guessing after 30 years the rubber diaphragm inside was probably somewhat weakened, not to mention with ethanol in the fuel nowadays, it's probably seen better days. So I was able to find a new one on eBay for $18, and I ordered that. I was also going to replace the internal fuel hoses and check the fuel filter, which is over to the right. This is a better shot of that assembly I was talking about. That is the fuel filter, and that whole thing removes and then unscrews. And I'm going to also replace those fuel lines because they seem to be kind of old and brittle. That one has been replaced already up on the top. I removed the old quick connectors so I could get access to the fuel lines, and then they just pulled right off of the fuel pump once I had that removed from the side of the engine. That was just 2 Phillips head screws that held that on. Once those screws were removed, the whole assembly just pulled right off, and then I just pulled the old fuel lines right off of that. There was a little gasket on the back of it, and the gasket was just a thin paper gasket, and it had kind of fallen apart, and I was just going to replace that. Hopefully one comes with the fuel pump, and that's the old fitting that I'm going to remove and just drill a hole through there and bypass everything and just put the fuel line in there. Initially, I bought a bulkhead fitting with 3/8-inch barbs on both ends, and I was just going to put it in there, but it turned out the fuel lines were different sizes, so I decided I was just going to have it pass right through the engine. And to get to that fuel filter, I just loosened the nut up on top. I think it was 14 millimeter, and then removed the whole assembly, just pulled the fuel lines off of that. And then once that was free, that whole cup just unscrews, and there's a fuel filter element inside, which is reusable, as well as a small O-ring on the top. You have to make sure that you don't lose that. The old fuel line was very hard and brittle, and it took some digging, but I was able to find some of the new marine grade fuel line that goes on the inside of the engine area. And once I got that, I measured it and cut a piece, and here's the replacement fuel pump which I got, and ironically did not come with a gasket, so I had to end up making one by buying some gasket material at AutoZone. It's 3 feet by 1 foot, and I cut off a small tiny piece to make a gasket for this, and that's probably enough gasket material to last me for the rest of my life, because that's all I needed was right there. Either way, it was $8 well spent, and I just drew around it with a pen and used a hole punch and marked the places to put the gasket, and hopefully it works okay. That's a 1/4-inch barbed fitting I was going to use to attach the fuel line to the outside, but it turns out I need a larger size. I need a 3/8, or actually it's a 5/16, an adapter that goes to a 1/4-inch, so that's supposed to arrive later from Mr. UPS man. And in the meantime, I can put the new fuel pump back in place and get everything else connected that I can. Reassembly was fairly easy, just kind of the reverse of taking it apart. And when I checked the quality of that fuel filter, it looked to be pretty good. Not to mention there's also an external fuel filter that's got a replaceable element that's mounted on the rear of the pontoon boat, so it's kind of doubly filtered going in there, so I think we should be okay. After I removed the fuel fitting, I needed to enlarge the hole a little bit, and I was having a struggle with the drill as it was trying to put me in the hospital. But I didn't let it win, and I was able to get the hole drilled out and make sure that there's enough room for the fuel line to pass through. And then I just removed the old fitting, and once I get that new 1/4 to 5/16 barbed adapter, I'll put that in, because you can see that's a 1/4-inch and it was too small. So I'm waiting on that part. A very exciting day has arrived. My new little fitting has arrived in the mail, and I can join the two dissimilar fuel lines together. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see here that I've replaced all the fuel lines and routed them, and the larger fuel line, it goes through the outboard housing with the hole I drilled to make it a little bit larger. And then I also replaced the P-tube where the water leaks out of the side. It also drains out of the back of the lower unit, but this way is a little visual indicator. So now let's start it up and see if it works. Now remember, this is a 30-year-old 2-stroke engine that hasn't been started in a long time, plus I added some seafoam to the gas, so it's going to smoke a little bit until everything gets cleaned out. I checked to make sure that it shifted into forward and reverse, which it did. Well, we got it running, and now it's time to take it out on the water to see what it does. After a few hours, I'm going to change the lower unit lube again, just to be sure, and then we'll go into the next project. We're working our way to 1,000 subscribers. Thanks again.